Council Judge preside.
Please be seated. Good morning. I understand we're still having some technical difficulties, and I will get started anyway. That might mean I have to listen to that buzz. Oh, Mr. O'Mara's not here.
We're getting him ready.
He's coming in.
Owen 44, so you're in courtroom 5.
Do we need to?
They can't.
They can't?
Got it here. You want me to test the sound? Strong, can you hear us?
Testing 1, 2. Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Let's find this video. Video's right.
If this doesn't fix the image.
Everybody's this will the record state for versus Zimmerman, case number 12, CFA 1083.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess as a preliminary matter, we did have those two pending motions. I didn't know if you wanted to address them before or later. Or, sorry, one pending motion regarding the motion to compel that we discussed yesterday, but I can go ahead and proceed. The first witness is virtually present, as you can see. Thank you, Your Honor. The state would call Mr. Tom Owen.
I'm here.
Please raise your right hand, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Owen, if you would, please go ahead and introduce yourself to the court. Tell her who you are, what you do for a living, and how long you've been at that.
My name is Tom Owen, O-W-E-N, at Owen Forensic Services in Colonia, New Jersey. I've been doing this approximately 50 years. I've been doing forensic audio and voice ID and so forth since 1981.
Tell me a little bit about both your academic background and the professional training and other circumstances affiliated with that you've undergone to enable you to pursue that career.
Prior to I graduated from college in 1969 with a pre-law degree. My intention at the time was to be a lawyer, heaven forbid. All through college and everything. I moved to New York and started working for record companies, where I was in the capacity of an engineer, a recording engineer, and an A&R man. In addition to that, I went to Lincoln Center, where I was the chief engineer at Rodgers and Hammerstein Archive of Recorded Sound for 11 years. And I went on my own for Owl Investigations, was my former business, in 1981. So since 81, I've been publishing and been active in the forensic community.
And Mr. Owen, you belong to any particular groups in the field of voice identification and audio engineering?
Yes. There's a committee at the Audio Engineering Society called the Forensic Audio Standards. I'm the chairman of that committee. There's also a group at the American College of Forensic Examiners called the American Board of Recorded Evidence. I'm the chairman emeritus of that committee. And I've been in other organizations, the International Association for Identification, Law Enforcement Video Association, American, I can't remember the name of one of them. Anyway, several other organizations over the years, some of which I've retired from because when you get to be a certain age, they don't make you pay dues anymore, but they keep you active.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have previously submitted for filing a CV of Mr. Owen. If there's no objection, I would tender that as an exhibit for this proceeding at this time, similar to the way we handled the other witness yesterday. No. Thank you. Mr. Owen, are the matters that we've just kind of briefly been discussing more fully set forth in the CV that we've just introduced to the court that you sent to us?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And Mr. Owen, have you ever testified as an expert in courts before?
Yes, I've testified over 300 times in approximately 30 or 40 states, several foreign countries. Never failed to qualify.
Would that also include the state of Florida, both state and federal level?
Yes, that's correct.
And just in terms of the types of organizations or clients for whom you do work, could you give us a little bit of a background as to who those might be?
I work for both the prosecution and the defense. I've also worked for federal agencies. I've also trained many members of law enforcement in terms of forensic audio, video, and voice ID. And this has been going on for some 25 years or so, as far as the training goes. And I work for banks and security companies and private investigators and individuals as well.
Mr. Owen, as it relates to this case, the state of Florida versus George Zimmerman, who was your actual original client in this case?
Well, the Orlando Sentinel, Jeff Weiner, called me and asked me to assist him in trying to determine whether or not you could tell who was screaming on the 911 call that the lady made from inside her house. I didn't really know anything about the case at the time, and he sent me the tapes, and I said that I would look at them, and so I guess he would be the client, and whatever TV station he works for, or newspaper. I'm sorry.
So you were not retained by the state attorney's office in this case before you did any of your work.
That's correct.
And you mentioned specifically a 911 audio recording. We heard that played here in court yesterday. There were several screen portions. When you go about analyzing or attempting to analyze a recording of this variety, tell us what sort of methods that you employ and a little bit about how long those methods have been around and who else might employ them.
Well, it is a 911 call, and there's always been this issue about screams on 911 calls. Practically every other or third 911 call has someone in distress or duress and screaming in the background. And so I took up this as a research project back in 1985, where I conducted a experiment with using spectrograms, oral spectrographic methodology, and basically was able to determine that even though a person's voice is raised by screaming in pitch, okay, the spectrograms look the same. The only thing that happens is the spectrograms themselves get either longer or shorter depending on where they are in the spectra of the pitch.
Why is pitch important to your analysis, and what exactly do you mean when you use that term?
Well, the pitch is the resonant the main frequency that we speak at. I'm speaking to you here today at about 130 cycles per second. That means my vocal cords vibrate 130 times each time I speak. Okay, that's the average male. That's the majority of the population. But if I speak up a little bit higher, if I speak up a little higher than that, if I speak up a little higher than that, then I'm raising my pitch. Okay, and there's methodology, old methodology from the 1980s that allows you to look at that high spoken sound and determine a person's pitch.
As far as the methodologies that you employed in this particular case, can you tell me, do you, number one, employ something that you referenced, I think, earlier, oral, meaning A-U-R-A-L, just sort of listening with an experienced
thought that are focused on just the
for some time. Computer algorithms or computer programs that assist in those sorts of tasks.
Yes, they've been given a 2013 fancy name called biometrics, but basically it's the same testing procedures of in the medical community for the purposes of before and after, for example, cleft palate operations. A person will speak into a microphone before the operation and afterwards, and by looking at the spectrograms and listening, the doctor can determine the quality or the success of the operation. And this company that makes the automated oral spectrographic program didn't make it for voice identification. They made it for the medical community. And the voice identification people co-opted the program in order to use it for their purposes.
Mr. Owen, when you conduct an analysis like the one you did in this case, do you simply pick one of those three methods that we've discussed and focus on it alone, or do you try to employ them all together?
No, I employ the critical listening. I think that's extremely important. I employ the spectrograms. I think they're extremely important. They give you a visual representation of the human voice. The listening gives you the listening part of the test where you can listen to something. And all of us are better. Some are better than others with listening, but all of us can recognize certain things. And just like when you play the 911 screaming calls, you can sort of tell whether you think it's one person or two people or three people. If your mother calls you on the phone and all that, and five other people call you, you can usually pick out your mother amongst the other five. So my point is, critical listening is very important. And you can get better at it by practicing and by doing a lot of cases. I've done thousands of cases. I did 1,000 cases during December and January and February of this year for a research project. So the more you do, the better you get at it.
And are any of the methods that you utilized in this case particularly new or novel or strange or unheard of before?
No, we talked about the biometric. That's been around for at least 20 years. The NSA, the CIA, the Department of Defense has been using this technology extensively, especially after 9/11. This is part of what they do, and they do it fairly well from what I understand.
I think we've seen a little bit about that in the news perhaps recently.
Yes. They don't talk about it a lot, let's put it that way, but they have been doing it, and even the FBI finally got around to including it in their forensic database.
What you did in order to prepare it for analysis, and then walk us through kind of how you went about it.
Sure. The tapes themselves were provided to me by the Orlando Sentinel, by Jeff Weiner. I listened, there were two calls. One was what I refer to as the original 911 call, where Mr. Zimmerman is at the scene and so forth. And then the second one is a call made by what I presume to be a woman in a house close by, where the that particular tape was one that I went into that tape and I cut out what I felt were the usable screams, and eliminated every.
The usable screams that you just referenced.
Yes, I did produce it, and I sent it to you, and I have it here if you want me to play it.
Mr. Owen, I got to tell you, it's not extremely lengthy. What can you tell us about how you were able to use that?
Well, the test, I had to double up the actual screams. So I fed the tape twice, one after the other, into the program, and the program allowed me to use that as a sample. And then it tests itself in my testing. How you heard me raise my voice and all that. I took George Zimmerman's voice from his reenactment of this event, where he says, "Help me, I need your help, I want help." And he said that a number of times. And I use that as a basis of an exemplar, of a known exemplar, which is obviously he's on camera doing that. So
If I could, just what was your goal in doing this? What were you specifically trying to do when you compared the screams that you just described for us to that known exemplar? What is it you're looking to do?
Well, the basic question for me was, who's screaming? Okay, I had no sample or exemplar of Trayvon Martin. Okay, at that time it didn't exist. Or at least it didn't exist to me. So all I had was Zimmerman, and that was from his own reenactment. So pursuant to that, I used Zimmerman to see whether Zimmerman would come up a yes or no on the person screaming.
Talk to me a little bit about this easy voice computer algorithm that you used to assist you as one of the methodologies. Explain which sort of methodology that involves, and a little bit about where it comes from.
Well, it comes from St. Petersburg, Russia. It was written by the same people who had wrote the multi-speech that I referenced in 1985. And the purpose of it is to automate procedures such as spectrographic analysis, pitch analysis, Gaussian analysis, or that's what they refer to it as. It's really intra-speaker variability, okay? And it takes those three things, and it automates the process. So you could do 100 people, you could view 100 people in a second or 2 seconds and eliminate them as the questioned caller. This is what the NSA and the CIA are doing on a daily basis. And they need something to do that very quickly in the thousands of calls and to eliminate various people. And this is the type of software that they use. Not the exact, they don't use the Russian software that I'm aware of. They wrote their own, as far as I know. But they use this software to automate that process, and that process is an ongoing process on a daily basis.
Now, we heard yesterday that there's a lot of variables that can affect whether or not a particular recording, such as this one, is usable for the type of analysis you're talking about. You know, things like distance, things like different channels, things like the fact that it's compressed on a cell phone. Tell us a little bit about all that and what those sorts of things do to an analysis like the one you've conducted.
Well, let's just put it out there that we don't have the perfect tape. Okay, that's a given. Okay, all right. Given that, okay, we still have the question before us as who is screaming. Okay, just like you would if I had a fire 911 tape and somebody wanted to know who was screaming. Maybe that's the one that was set the fire. So having screaming on tape is not anything unusual or new or novel. Okay, being able to determine whether or not it is a person or not. It's much easier to eliminate someone than it is to positively identify someone. And what we have here, what we have to work with is approximately from my tape, and I had a redacted version. So there's about 7 or 8 seconds missing where the lady's giving her address and so forth. And so if there's any screams within that area, I don't have them on my tape, okay? At any rate, I have approximately 10 screams. And within those each one almost to a number, almost everyone has a spoken word. Help, I need help, help me, and so forth. They're listed on my what I sent you the other day. So we have spoken word. Even though it's way up in frequency, it's screamed, it's spoken word. Spoken word creates formats. Formats can be sliced like an orange with a narrowband filter.
Slow down, Mr. Owen. You're going to have to explain what a format is.
Okay, a format is the acoustical energy within the human voice, and it's represented on a spectrogram as a darker area. Spectrograms are light and dark, and it's the dark area. And not only does it have a contour, but it has a shape, okay? So all those things in the prior days, you know, in the 70s and 60s, 50s and 40s, had to be viewed with analog equipment. Around 1985, when multi-speech and the 5500K elementary machine came out, it was all those processes were automated. So we have the benefit of being able to measure precisely, very, very precisely, all of these things. When I say all of these things, I'm talking about the position of the formats. I'm talking about the mean frequency of someone who's screaming. And when I was talking about the orange analogy, basically you're taking the screaming sound and you're using a narrowband filter and you're slicing it up in several hundred slices, and the distance between the slices measured is the person's pitch. Okay, the one that's saying it in their normal voice and the one that's screaming it, only this gives you a way to measure it with the old technology. Now, think about this. If the NSA has 10,000 voices that they're running from Iraq back and forth to the States, do you think that they have enough people to sit there and do that process for each and every sentence? Well, the answer is no. So they had to come up with an automated process that did that automatically. And they've done that, and they've been doing it for a long time. And that's what Easy Voice is. Easy Voice is nothing other than a 100 or less voice system, okay? They have a 1,000,000 voice system. I have a 100 or less system. I'll never use a 1,000,000 voice system. I seldom ever use 100 at a time system, okay? But it's big enough and fast enough and does the same thing as that million voice system does. Just does it on a smaller scale. So I utilize that technology to, in addition to the old technology, to determine, well, let's see, could this be Zimmerman? Yes or no?
And
Now-
when you conduct an analysis like this, I mean, do you always get a result? Are you always able to render a conclusion of yes, no, or do you sometimes run into some where you're just not able to reach one?
Of course. It's yes, no with a degree. It's probable with a degree. It's no decision. Okay. And there are a lot of factors. The tape's too noisy, for example, not enough signal to noise ratio. There's a million reasons why it could be rendered not usable.
We heard about something yesterday called a Gaussian mixture model. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, and did that play a part in what you did?
Well, I don't know who. It depends on who's saying it, but the Gaussian, as expressed in Easy Voice, the manual and technology, is basically referring to intra-speaker variability. What makes Zimmerman's voice different from, say, Trayvon Martin's voice, or your voice, or my voice? Okay, so that's basically what that measures. And there's a million other things that go along with that. I've sent you an article, several articles, one of which delineates all the, if I may refer to this article. And I'm talking now about law and the expert witness, which is, I don't know if you put that in as evidence or not.
Ask that the paper be submitted.
Well, Mr. Owen, before you, if you're not going to, since we don't have it here to submit, let me ask you this. Are you talking about literature that's generally relied upon by persons who do what you do?
Yes.
Okay. And in a nutshell, without directly quoting it, could you summarize what it is you're talking about, please?
Yeah, there's two aspects of the oral spectrographic method. The oral part of it is the listening part, and you determine how fast someone speaks. How many words do they say in a second or a minute or whatever time frame you want to look at? The mannerisms, I live in New Jersey. People who watch The Sopranos are used to hearing "forget about," and stuff like that. And that's a mannerism that's idiosyncratic to New Jersey. If you go to Boston, they're going to speak it a certain way in Boston. So these are things called mannerisms. Syllable coupling, how do people put their words together? How many, does someone start out like a ball of fire at the beginning of the sentence and end up in a whimper at the end of the sentence? The manner in which they speak is very important. And that delves into the phonetic linguistic people. They're very in tune with, the spoken language and how it's done and so forth.
Let's go back to... Go ahead.
Let me finish. Visually, the spectrogram shows you the time, energy, and frequency of the human voice in a visual manner. Okay, and if you look at the spectrogram, usually when I say time, it's usually cut off at 2.5 or 3 seconds or whatever you want to put on the screen. And about 3 or 4 seconds is the most readable 5 or 6 words, 8 words, something like that. Okay, and basically, so the time is going to be fixed. The frequency is going to be fixed because it's going to be from 0 to 4,000 hertz, which is the speaking voice frequency. Okay, so you don't need to have 22,000 hertz or the sound of a CD. You don't need that quality because you're only interested in the voice. And if you have enough voice frequency, then it's a usable sample. So you've got all this information that shows you visually what's happening and verifies what you hear.
Mr. Owen, going back to the particular analysis in this case, you mentioned that you used those 3 methodologies that we've already discussed and employed the computer to assist you in determining whether you could match the known sample of the defendant in this case to what you had determined was the usable screams from the tape you had for the newspaper.
sorry to object, I think the question mischaracterizes the witness's testimony that he employed all three methods. In his opinion, I think the witness said he used easy voice biometrics.
Sure. Mr. Owen, there's been, let me ask you, you used, as I heard you say earlier, you did use critical listening in this case?
Of course.
You have used what we've called the oral spectrographic method, where you've referred to spectrographs in this case,
Yes.
and you've also used the easy voice biometric computer system. Do I understand that to be correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So you used all three in this case.
Yes.
All right. Is that sufficient, Your Honor? Thank you. Mr. Owen, were you able to conduct this analysis given the materials that you had? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about how you did that and what you came up with?
Yes. I said earlier that I had an exemplar of George Zimmerman from his reenactment. I took the reenactment, I need help, etc., and I made a tape out of that, sufficient length and all that to work in easy voice. I then took those enactments, that text, and elevated it electronically. Three semitones, 4 semitones, 6 semitones, which has the effect of raising the pitch up. I matched the pitch that the screams occur at, between 700 and 1500 hertz. Okay. There's also a sheet that I sent you from the Easy Voice, which shows that the 6th semitone, the 4th semitone, the 3 semitone, all match with George Zimmerman's original spoken word. The screams don't match at all. So that's what tells me that, okay, it's not George Zimmerman of the screams that I presented.
And I think you said you didn't make a determination as to who it was. You made a determination as to who it did not appear to be.
That's correct.
And did you say earlier that that was actually a much easier determination than if you had to go ahead and also make an identification?
Well, it's always harder to make a positive ID, whether it's George Zimmerman or anybody else.
Now, my understanding is that you also analyzed a different tape in this case as it relates to a possible racial slur or something that might have been used. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And did you use the Easy Voice protocol and the other methods that you've already discussed when you did that as well?
Yes, that's correct. Sometime after I gave the initial finding about the screams, I believe Jeff Weiner contacted me again and said that there had been some issue about can I curse on the thing?
Unfortunately, it's language that I'm sure the court has heard before, so please go ahead and just be as explicit as you need to be.
There was an issue of a statement that was made as Mr. Zimmerman was talking to the 911 operator. He said, "These fucking blank," and so people took up the mantra that he was saying "these fucking coons," and so it was not something that I was concerned at it originally. So I didn't know whether it was true or not. So I went back to the tape. And I excised that portion in which he's speaking, and I did a little enhancement on it. There's a sort of a whack right in the middle of the third word, and I was able to fix that and put it through several programs, SoundForge, Sound Cleaner, which is a Russian program, and I came up with "these fucking punks." Punks.
Now, let me ask you this. Those programs that you just referred to, I guess, could we call those filtering type programs to filter out sounds other than speech?
Yes, they're basically audio editing and enhancement programs, commercially available.
Anything new or novel, particularly about any of the ones that you used?
No.
Okay. And so you actually were able to determine that it didn't appear to you to be a slur at all, or a racial slur at all.
No, it was not racial. And I actually went on Al Sharpton's program in New York and said that.
And was your conclusion to that as firm as your conclusion as it relates to the fact that the defendant was not the one screaming?
Yes.
Were you ever contacted in September of 2012 by the defense team in this case?
No, maybe your approach in this matter.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Owen, you still there?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Owen, were you able to come up with a relative likelihood that the screams in question here could have been produced by the defendant? In other words, I know you said that you determined that it wasn't him. Tell me what about your analysis says that?
Well, my analysis says that I believe you have the latest Easy Voice sheet that I sent you. I don't know if you can see this or not.
That's all right. I believe the court and counsel both have it, so go ahead and explain it.
Okay. The program tells me that 3 semitones up is George Zimmerman. There's a little green dot. I don't know if you can see this or not. Little green dots. Green dots are yes. Yellow dots are probable. Black dots or gray dots are no. And so we have for the Zimmerman 3 semitones, the Zimmerman 6 semitones, and the Zimmerman 4 semitones. They all say it's George Zimmerman in one fashion or another. Against the screams, okay, they say it's no, it's a no-go, and it's only a 33% matching against the screams.
Mr. Owen.
The other ones are in the 70s and the high 60s.
Okay. So it's less than half of what you would have expected had it actually matched.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Owen, as far as the conclusions you reached, is it uncommon in your field for scientists to disagree as to their opinions of what evidence may show, even if they apply, generally speaking, the same types of methodologies?
Yes, they do disagree.
Okay.
That's like asking if lawyers disagree with one another.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Your Honor. No other questions.
Good morning, Mr. Owen.
Mr. West, I presume?
Yes, thank you. You can hear me well enough?
I can hear you fine, thank you.
Can you see us?
Yes, if you could move over just to your left. There you go, that's fine.
All right, thank you. You mentioned earlier at the beginning that you had been doing this work for about 50 years. Is that correct?
Audio work, yes, audio enhancement. And I started doing the voice stuff in '81.
How old are you?
I'm 67 years old.
So you've been doing professional voice identification work since you were 17?
No, I just said that I started doing the voice stuff from 1981.
I see.
So I did. Let me finish. I made my first wedding recordings when I was 15 years old. That's how I made money when I was 15 years old. So if I'm 67, then you can do the math.
I understand it. So are you suggesting that doing wedding recordings helps qualify you as an expert in a court of law for speaker identification?
No, you asked me how long I've been in this business, meaning the audio business. Correct?
Well, I'm trying to clarify what you meant when you said you've been doing this kind of work for 50 years.
I've been doing audio recording. I think the question related to critical listening at the time, but I've been doing this type of work since I was 15 years old, professional.
And in 1981 is when you transitioned into the forensic side of it?
Yes, that was shortly before that. I published my first paper in 1981 referencing voice identification and Dr. Tosi's study from Michigan State.
Dr. Tosi is a well-known advocate of spectrographic analysis, is that right?
Ye rest in peace. Yes, he was.
And that's the method that you employed?
The methods that I employed were the listening, the oral spectrographic, and the biometric.
The biometric came into play when, please?
It's been around for the last 10 or 15 years that I'm aware of.
When did you begin using biometric analysis in your work?
About 3 years ago.
And has it always been the Easy Voice Biometrics program?
No, it started out as something else. Voice Grid, I believe was the name of it at the time.
When did you begin using the particular software that you employed in this case?
For the last year and a half, 2 years.
Can you be a little more precise?
At least 2 years.
So would that make it June of 2011?
I can't say for sure. The software, the naming of it as Easy Voice was more so a marketing thing than anything else. It started off as a much larger system made in Russia for the last 15 years or so. Let me finish. They dumbed it down so they could have a product to sell with 100 or less voices. Okay, that was called Voice Grid. I don't know exactly when they first put that out. I had it probably 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years, at least 3 years ago. I went to the company and I made a suggestion, along with others, that they try to make it more Windows friendly and give it a marketable name to more reflect what it does. And that's how I came up with Easy Voice as opposed to Voice Grid. It's still sold as Voice Grid in Europe and other places.
My question, though, was when did you acquire the software that you used for your analysis in this case?
At least a year or two before I did the case.
Did you get a beta version, or did you get something that was commercially available at the time?
It was commercially available.
Did you participate in the development of the software?
No.
Do you have any background, any formal training in mathematics?
No.
Your degree from college is in history, am I correct?
That's correct.
And you hold no other advanced degrees?
No.
You claim to understand the math involved in the computer software that you used in this case.
No, I make no such claim.
Can you explain how the algorithm works that's employed by this software?
Specifically, no. I mean, that's a trade secret. I don't think they'll put that out on the street.
Well, just generally, perhaps you could explain the Gaussian component of this in more detail.
In terms of what?
Just explain what that means in the context of this software.
What that means is automatically it applies the algorithm and determines several factors, one of which is intra-speaker variability.
Are you familiar with the acronym is NIST?
Yes.
And have you submitted this software to NIST for evaluation?
I personally haven't, but the company has.
Is it your testimony today that this particular software has been submitted to NIST for evaluation?
I don't know if the one that I'm using is the one they put in for analysis, but I know that they put in their product for a NIST evaluation, and that's a matter of record.
Well, do you know how it did?
It did fairly well.
What would you describe as fairly well? Are you referring to something?
Yeah, I'm referring to the NIST document. reflecting as to how well it did. So let me just, if I may just read this.
Well, before you do, what's the name of the document and who authored it?
This is a document from NIST that was sent to Alexei Kitzroff, who's president of Speech Pro, which is the American side of Speech Technology Center.
When
And
was
this,
it?
this is these are the graphs provided by NIST to him. And if I'd like to be able to read this sentence because to answer your question.
Would you be able perhaps to email us this paper so that we could look at it with you?
It's already been sent.
Pardon me?
It was just sent recently.
Well, when did you get it?
I got it maybe a week or so ago.
And did you provide it to Mr. Manti?
Yes. Maybe 3-4 days ago. What's today, Friday? Maybe Monday.
While we're on the subject, I think you also mentioned that you had prepared a transcript of the speech that you were able to identify from the screams.
Yes.
Do you have that transcript available?
Yeah, that's what he just played.
The transcript, in my mind, is a written document that identifies the words that you were able to identify.
It's actually on the screen. When you play it in SoundForge software, it's on the screen. It comes up on the screen. And each individual yell or scream is flagged.
Oh, are you saying that you have a written transcript that
Not-
identifies? Let me finish. Let me finish this time, please. Do you have a written transcript that identifies what I'm calling a scream, but apparently you're calling speech, that articulates the word that you have identified for each of those screams?
Yes, it's on the file that I've recently sent.
Did you provide that to Mr. Manti?
Yes, I did.
May I look at that?
Mr. Owen, do you have to actually possess SoundForge software to see what you're talking about?
Yes.
You have to know how to use it?
To a certain extent, yes.
To your knowledge, do I possess either of those capabilities at this moment here in Sanford, Florida?
Not that I'm aware of.
So even if I wanted to give it to anyone, could I?
Yes. I can print it out and from the program and make it available.
You could print it out and mail it if you wanted to,
I could email it, yes.
but that hasn't been done.
Not yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Explain, just, we won't spend a lot of time on this because apparently you have not provided a written transcript of what you were able to identify as speech on the recording. Is that correct?
Not in the manner in which you're describing it, no.
What is the manner in which you're describing it then?
When you pull it up in SoundForge, it comes up and each scream is flagged.
Are you saying then that SoundForge is a computer program that recognizes speech?
No. It doesn't recognize speech. You type in what you think the word says, and then it appears as a flag, and it's obvious. And you can print out the list of the flags, and it tells you where they occur and what the words are that I've typed in.
So are you saying then that you conducted an analysis of this recording orally and identified each of these screams by the English word that you believe was spoken?
That's correct.
And how many separate occasions did you identify speech, as in words that you can identify?
I have a total of 10 screams, of which 2, I don't have it right in front of me, of which 2, I cannot identify what's being said. So 8 total, I think.
And they were all help me or some version of that?
Yes.
Were you able to identify any other speech on the recording other than help me?
Your Honor,
No.
I could interpose at this moment. I've actually filed an objection to going too far afield on this. I think what we're entering now is outside the scope of that written objection is
No, Your Honor.
Specifically as it relates to speaker identification, those were the matters referenced in the motion, noticed for the motion, and testified about already. Otherwise, again, it's not subject to a FRI analysis under the McCoy decision. It's a decision that gets advanced if and when a transcript is alleged for juror use or presented to the court for juror use, but it's well outside the scope of the FRI hearing, which I assume is why it wasn't included in the motion.
Your Honor, I'd like to be heard on that, and it's going to take us a little while to do that. We got that motion this morning, and I'd like to talk about some of the case law and talk about the history of this case in that context. So we can do that.
Can I ask you a question, sir? What might be an inconvenience, but if we were to continue with this portion of your testimony, and I could take up the objections later today, and then have you available if we need you to give more testimony at this time.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, but I think you said you're going to give it back to them and then you're going to revisit me later today?
I was going to let them go forward with the matters that are not covered in the state's objection, and then I'm going to hear the state's objection and argument about that, make a decision as to whether or not we're going to continue to cover it yet. So are you available this afternoon?
Your Honor, I have another
We'll go
suggestion.
forward now, but then we may need to begin this afternoon. Would that be something we'd be available for?
I'm yours for the day.
I have another suggestion. We can simply proceed with the testimony, and then the court can sort it out later, whether or not it's something that should be taken into consideration in its ruling on these matters.
Then the state's going to object to each thing that's being said, and I'm going to have to make a I don't know.
The overall objection, Your Honor, is that witnesses that claim to have identified speech on the recording that prepared transcripts of that speech, the state claims is not a proper subject of this proceeding. And we believe it is for lots of reasons. And what I'd like to do with this witness is simply confirm, as he's already said, was he able to identify speech? What was that speech? And was there no other speech? And then we know what it is, and he's going to send us the actual transcript of the speech, I assume, with a marker where on the recording this speech occurred. And
State's position is twofold. And again, as a vote in the written protection, that is a matter that is well outside the scope of FRI in general, because you're talking now not about speaker identification or methodology. Now you're talking about what is and is not audible on a tape, which is governed by a completely different set of case law than the FRI standard. It's not subject, as I think the McCoy case makes pretty clear, to that analysis. So that's my first objection. My second objection is we're now asking the witness to, again, go ahead and engage in this, and we would be quarreling over potentially matters which the state has not set forth as intending to present in evidence yet. The state hasn't submitted any transcript for consideration or publication to this jury. And unless and until that happens, it's something that's really not right. We're arguing about things that may never come to be. So it's premature, which is why I take it was left out of the motion, and which is why it would not be a proper subject for the motion. Long way of answering the question. Apologies.
briefly, the history of how this issue came to be. I have to sort of try to remember the sequence of events, but first of all, prior to today, we had no idea that this witness had generated a transcript where he believes he has identified speech as distinct from screams. And I'm going to talk with him before the day's over about whether he used those words that he believes he's identified as part of his analysis regarding who spoke those words or who was screaming. That's a subpart of it that relates specifically to this witness, and it is clearly involved in the Fry hearing. Mr. Manti suggests that it's premature. Well, that's what Fry is. It's an opportunity for the court to hear the methodology, the application of that methodology to the specific facts of the case to render a decision whether it's admissible for the jury to hear. So that's the overall context. The history was that on sometime early in the case, Mr. Owen was identified as, I think, a B witness, maybe a C witness, not an A witness. We had conversations over the intervening months between then and now whether Mr. Owen would actually attempt to be called by the state. And recently we were told yes. There was never a commitment until within the last couple of months or so that yes. There is a witness that is subject to these proceedings today, Harry Holeen, who is from the University of Florida, who did a separate methodology. The court has that report. Where
Oh, the state's.
It's actually one of the states, yes.
Yes, yes, and that's Dr. Harry Holeen and Dr. James Harnsberger's report that basically is inconclusive, but the state is seeking to advance their opinions notwithstanding. So, and I'd have to be reminded as to the sequence of the events, but we received notice under the court's order disclosing witnesses of Dr. Holeen's involvement in the case officially sometime in late March, I think maybe by the 26th or 27th. We got a report from Dr. Holeen sometime in mid-April, 14th or 15th, somewhere around there, and then he was deposed, as Dr. Harnsberger was, near I think it was April 19th. We also received the name of Dr. Alan Reich, R-E-I-C-H, around that same time. We got and then we filed a motion for this Fry hearing, as I recall. And the state responded and said, no, we don't need a Fry hearing because all of this methodology has been well established for decades. And we filed a response to that. In the meantime, not until May 10th of this year did we get Dr. Reich's report, where Dr. Reich now claims that he can identify not just the speaker, but also identify speech that no other expert has identified, and apparently not even Mr. Owen has been able to identify this speech. So we got additional follow-up from Dr. Reich. We learned at his deposition on May 24th or 25th, I think it was, may even have been later than that, that he had done another report, and that he had done one when he was hired by the Washington Post, and he provided that to the state when they engaged him no later than July of last year. We didn't learn about that report until his deposition, which isn't complete, and in fact his work isn't complete, as we've explained to background. We're still pedaling as fast as we can just to understand what direction this is headed. And this witness has identified speech. He claims to be a voice identification expert, so I think it's only reasonable that we be able to explore what speech he claims to have identified, and frankly, to compare it with speech that other experts have claimed to identify perhaps later today. The point is that he clearly prepared a transcript, and that clearly entered into his decision as to his opinion here.
But if he has prepared, if he has the capability of preparing of what you refer to as transcript, and he refers could deal with that separately. And if you'll give me a moment, Mr. Owen, would it be possible for you to recreate that document and email it so the attorneys in the court can have a copy of it and go forward with your testimony?
Are you talking to me, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
I can do it right now.
Okay, so how long will it take you to do it, and how are we going to provide it? Do you have somebody's email address?
I'm sorry, you cut out.
Email address?
Yes, I don't want to give my email address over national TV.
I don't want your email address. My question is, do you have one of the attorney's email address?
Yes, I can send it to Rich again right now.
Okay, if you'll send it right now, we'll get it printed out. We'll take a few-minute recess. The attorneys will have an ability to review it, and we can go on with that aspect with it. But
All right, show-
evidence, do not allow any expert to comment on another expert's report.
Well, I think we can do that in the context of a Fry hearing. I agree it may be more limited before the jury if any of this evidence winds up being admitted, but that's...
I can do this in this step process. Let's go ahead and get that email to Mr. Manti, get it printed out, have counsel in the court the ability to review it, and then we can move on to the next.
And while we're at it, the document that Mr. Owen refers to from NIST, we'd like to have that too.
The ability to fax or email the NIST document that you refer to Mr. Manti,
Yes, Your Honor.
if you will do that also.
Yes, sir. Yes, I will.
You know, kind of stand by with us. We'll give you the opportunity for it to be printed out and for the attorneys to look at it.
That's fine.
Your Honor, if I may, just one last time in response to what you just said, we are now going to be talking about sort of product, not methodology. We are now discussing their opinion as to what may have been done, as opposed to anything that's covered in the motion, where they want to know about methodologies as it relates to the identity of the person making the noise, whatever it is, as opposed to going line by line or word by word through what any person, this expert, another expert, Dr. Wright, anybody else might think. Again, that's why that would dramatically open and put in unfamiliar territory the scope of a hearing like this. This is designed about methodologies, not...
I don't know what documents that are going to be emailed to you and what they refer, what they're going to indicate. That's why I'm having an email, take a recess, that's what we'll have them. We'll be able to have a discussion hopefully about that, if we want that out, come back.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Judge.
So, we'll be recess while that's